Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Wine. Welcome back to art class. Today, I will be showing you a video that will show you how to take your practice work for your Paul Klee artwork and get those colors down into your real artwork. So for this, you will need your practice sheet so you can see what colors you can create. You will need your Paul Klee artwork. Now, as you can see, I'm not quite finished with mine. You can see that I have added the doors and windows. I've traced some of the lines, but you can see some of my lines are still in pencil and some of my lines are not yet finished. That's okay because all you need today is the outside shape of each building. We're not painting in any small details. We're just painting in the whole building. So even if your paper's not finished, as long as you have the outlines of the buildings, you can do the painting part today. In addition to my artwork, I will also need a set of watercolor paints, a paper towel or a napkin, a watercolor brush, and a cup with my water. So let's get started. The first thing I have to do is I always want to start by checking my brush, rinsing it, making sure that it's clean by wiping it on my napkin because I don't want to start with a dirty brush. And then I have to look back to the color scheme that I think I'm going to use. Last week when I practiced, I wanted to use some contrasting colors, some blues and oranges, so that I could show that this city is diverse and full of contrast and very alive because those colors are really going to bounce off of each other. And I'm still creating washes of color. So I'm going to start with my lightest colors. And my first wash that I want to make is that wash. I'm going to start of just plain orange. So just like last week, I'm going to get water, I'm going to get orange, and I'm going to put some orange in my paint lid. And then I'm going to add a little bit of water. And if I want to test and see what this color is going to look like before I put it on my paper, then a good place to test that is I can use last week's practice sheet just to give it a little test. That's a little lighter than I want it, so I think I'm going to come back and add a little bit more orange into this watery area. Oh, that's a little bit better. So now that I have my wash, I'm just going to take that wash of color. So now I'm working from my lid, not the paint palette or not the paint pan, but the actual palette on top. And I'm going to find one of my buildings and I'm just going to paint that entire building with that wash of color. So now I don't have to worry about painting inside any of those dividing lines. The only place I have to go slow is when I get to the edge of the building. So when I get to the edge, that's where I'll go very slowly. But other than that, I just want to spread that paint evenly on my building. And I want a nice, light, transparent wash. So I painted that whole building with that orange color. If I get out of the lines just a little bit, I can use some water in my napkin to clean that right up. And then once I'm sure I've got this paint spread evenly, I want to leave that section alone. Now, I like to skip every other section so my colors don't bleed together. And because I want my buildings to each look a little bit different, now is when I'm going to experiment with this wash. I think I'm going to add just a tiny bit of red to this orange to make it a little bit brighter, a little more red-orange. So it's not a big change, just a tiny bit of red. And then maybe I add a tiny bit more orange and a few more drops of water. And again, I'm gonna check that on my practice paper. That looks just a little different. So now I'm gonna take this second wash, I'm gonna skip a building, and now I'm gonna come in and paint this building. Now again, I'm thinking about painting this whole building with that new color. I'm not painting in any of the windows or any of the lines. I'm just painting that entire building with that wash of color. I go slowly around the edges, but once I've painted those edges, I'm just filling in that whole building with that red-orange color. And again, slowly around the edges, holding that brush close. And then I'm done with my second building. Try to get that paint spread as evenly as I can. If I get a few drips, try to get rid of those. Okay, now I want to skip this building and I'm going to go on to my third building. And that's where I really like that bright orange yellow. So I'm going to see if I can use some yellow to add back into here. So I'm still working with the same orange, I'm just changing it up a little bit. So now I'm gonna add some yellow. Get a lot of yellow on my brush. As soon as I do that, now my brush is orange. I have to clean it again. Check it on my napkin, get a drip of water, go back into that yellow. Clean it again if I need more yellow. It's super important I try to keep my paint set clean. There I'm getting that nice golden color. And again, I can make sure I check that before I use it. That looks great. So I'm ready to paint my last building. So I'm gonna take this wash of that golden color, I'm gonna skip a building, and I'm gonna come over here and paint my very last building. Slowly around the edges. And again, notice I'm not painting the different sections. Now I'm going back to thinking of this whole thing as one building. Now I wanted my paper to have blues and oranges. So now I'm finished with my oranges. I painted every other building orange. I'm gonna go back and add some blue. So what I want to do is, before this dries, now's a good time for me to go ahead and clean out this color. I'm gonna use my napkin, clean it out. Remember, if it's dried, I can get my wet brush, kind of use it like a mop, and I'm gonna clean that out. And then for my next part, I think I'm going to start with just that plain blue wash. So in my paper, I could see what it looked like when I just did a blue. So I'm gonna take that blue, I'm gonna put it over here in a small section. I'm just gonna do this small building, so I don't need a lot of color. I'm putting that blue right up here in my lid. I don't want it to be too dark, so I'm just gonna add a little drip of water. Again, I don't need a ton because I'm just painting a small building. Test it out. That looks pretty good. And then I'm ready to paint this building. So I'm gonna be super careful when I get to the edges. That's the really tricky part. Get a little more of that wash. Have to be careful if the paint starts to puddle up. I want to make sure I spread it out. And remember, my painting is not glued down to my paper, my table. So if I need to move my painting around to get a better angle when I'm painting those edges, I can. And now I think I'm gonna try adding a little bit of green to that wash for my last building. So I'm gonna get a little bit of green, mix it in there, add some water, test it on my test paper. Oh, that looks pretty good. Looks about like what I made before. And so now this I gotta be careful. I gotta make sure I have enough to last the whole building, so I make sure I have a pretty good puddle in there. And then I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna paint my last building. Again, slowly around the edges. Slowly, especially where it touches those other buildings, so those colors don't bleed together. Starting to run out of paint, so it's good that I'm almost finished. And notice my washes are nice and transparent. You should be able to easily see your black lines. If you can't see your black lines, you need to add more water. Now, the last thing this leaves me at my painting is my sky. So I think I'm gonna stay in the blue family for my sky. I'm gonna mix a wash, but I know my sky is a really big area, so maybe that's a good place to use this middle section of my paint set. So I'm gonna put some blue up here. Lots of water, lots of blue. Nice big lake of color. It's really important whatever color I mix, I wanna make sure I have enough to do the entire sky. So lots of blue, lots of water. And then because I want that color to be a little bit unique, check it on my napkin, I think I'm gonna add just a tiny bit of purple. So it's not gonna be quite the same blue as my plain blue building. And then again, I want to add lots of water, so I know that I'm going to have enough to paint the whole sky. And of course, before I start, I want to check it on my paper, make sure I like that color. Oh, very nice. So now I'm ready to paint my sky. Now, one thing I can tell you is I don't like having to reach all the way across my paper to paint to my sky. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with sort of turning this paper upside down. So now I can reach all the parts of the sky very easily. And I'm just gonna start by getting my wash. And again, I'm going slowly when I get to the edge of the building. But then once I've got to the edge of those buildings, I'll just work small section at a time. And then I really wanna spread that paint out so that I don't have any big puddles of paint. I will also tell you, other than outlining, when I paint the sky, I really like to use horizontal brush strokes, because when I think of the sky and I think of like clouds or streaks in the sky, I think of those streaks as going across the sky, not up and down. So that's gonna help my brush strokes be nice and even. And I want to work neatly, but it is kind of tricky because I also need to paint quickly enough that these areas aren't drying before I get into the next area. So again, I'm going to outline carefully and then fill that in. And I just keep going until I've finished everything. So your goal really should be to have your color scheme in mind, work quickly. Once I've painted an area and that area starts to dry, I want to just leave it alone. I don't scrub with the brush. If the paint's starting to dry, it means I need to get more paint on my brush as I work to finish that last area. So this is the part that we will be doing in class this week. I hope you have a wonderful week. I can't wait to see what your cityscapes look once you get some color in there. And until next time, keep on creating.